Welcome to the Keen on Yoga podcast, bringing you the stories of many people who in various ways are attempting to walk the path of yoga. Our intention is to inspire your own practice and commitment to yoga beyond the mat and in all areas of life. We consider this an offering, a service to the community and labour of love. If you feel inclined, any donations are appreciated. Just visit our page and click the donate button at www.keenonyoga.co.uk/podcast. I hope you enjoy the show. Today's guest on the Keen on Yoga podcast is Ajay Tokas. Ajay grew up in a traditional Hindu family where he was exposed to the yoga scriptures and also wandering sadhus from a young age. So he was inspired to take up yoga from a very early age and finally arrived at practicing Ashtanga yoga quite late in his development with yoga. He'd been practicing hatha yoga in Delhi. He's a native city in India for many years before in 2010 arriving in Mysore to study with Sharathji Jois. Quickly making his way through the series. I think he's currently practicing halfway through the fourth series. So he's a very advanced practitioner and one that I've had the pleasure or displeasure of practicing next to many times. Previously teaching in Delhi, he's now residing in Siberia with his wife Olga and their young son, and he travels and teaches internationally. Welcome to the Keen on Yoga podcast, Ajay.
Thank you,
Hi.
Keen.
What got you into yoga? Can you just tell us your background and your experience of yoga, how you started?
So, it's all started with my family. A lot of people who know about me is I have a strong impression from my mother because she was reading out the stories to us when we were kids about yogis, and then during the traveling in India, in the pilgrimages with my parents, with my grandparents, I always saw yogis standing, doing one leg balance and some of the different distorted yoga postures, which we see in the...
You saw that in your childhood?
Yeah, I saw that.
You're right.
Yes. And that left the image in my mind as a child that I wanted to seek, or I wanted to pursue more about it. When I grew up, while growing up, I was going through books, and I like stories from Bhagavad Gita or stories from Ramayana or different stories or listening about yogis. So I think I was around 18 that I started to develop a breathing problem, that one of the bone in my nostrils started to grow, and I had difficulty in breathing. And whenever the weather was changing, so long story short, that I developed sinusitis, and then to seek the remedy. That time I had no information about that it can be cured with yoga. So I didn't meet. And then I had to go for an operation. It was around 2000. And then in 2001, I had a similar issue again. But because of that problem, I start to seek out an alternate method through which I can treat myself. And then I started to find more information. That's how I learned about Neti. And then Neti started working on my problem, that I got that else, that I can breathe easy, breathe freely, breathe deeper. And this is how I start to explore more and more. That's how I stepped into yoga around, say, 1999, I started to look out for more options. Yeah.
And that was hatha yoga?
Yeah, that was...
Yeah. Okay.
Yoga. Yeah. And I've gone through different traditions because I went to different schools. India is a big country, and a lot of if you travel through south, you will find a different aspect. If you go to north, you find people teaching same but slightly different things. They add or they delete or they add, edit, something like this. So it's like everyone has a view of their own when they look at the same picture, something like this.
Did you have a teacher back then? Because I've met you and you've only been doing Ashtanga for a couple of years, but whatever that means, you've got quite good at it. So I had the understanding that you'd done like hatha yoga for many years before that, right?
Yes, that's true. So for first few years of yoga practice, I was only exposed to majority of philosophy or philosophical books. When I stayed in ashrams, so I was going through a lot of reading, like the Yoga Sutras or Hatha Yoga Pradipika. and meeting people. But in the first 5-6 years, I was meeting mainly people who were more into meditative practices. So the asana very limited. So when I was learning, so the Shirshasana is already a big thing. So they said if you can hold Shirshasana, it's one of the advanced postures. So yeah, and so I was always, whenever I asked my first teacher, Anupji, that okay, I want to learn. And so Bakasana, when he taught me, he said, this is a balance. I could barely do Bakasana. I still remember.
Really? No way.
Yeah. So I could hold for 10 seconds and I said, okay. But that was like a fire, the initiation. So I liked, and I said, no, I want to learn more. And then I started to more physical part. So then I checked the Light on Yoga book by B.K. Iyengar, like a lot of practitioners around the world. I saw it in a bookstall. One of my friends who's a doctor in the US now. So he also gave me a lot of information about schools, traditional schools in India where they teach yoga. So B.K. Iyengar School in Pune was one. Then Sharathji Jois, I only heard from him. But we had no address, no website, because that time internet was very limited. Like it's not that you type Google and something comes up. And then something like this was happening. So I had no familiarity with Ashtanga before I landed to KPJ. So I never learned.
You didn't know anything about it? Or you must have known a bit about it. No, you planned your trip there.
Yeah. So I did the trip in 2010 I reached, and that's how I started the practice.
And you didn't know the series, or you didn't know nothing about it?
No clue. The only thing I saw is the first day when I enter, I saw the posters which are big inside the shala, in the old shala.
Yeah.
Which they show the series. So primary and intermediate. That's how
Why did you decide to go there?
See, I was, after a point of time, practicing hatha yoga because I was going to different traditions. So I always see that you go to one place, they change the asanas. The sequence is changed. Another place you go, then the sequence is changed. So I kind of, at one point of time, I asked myself that which school I want to follow, like what practice I want to do. And then I was all confused. Not confused, but I was always thinking, should I do only backbending today, or should I do only the today? So something like this. Wanted a practice which is at least complete in itself, that I don't have to think. So I don't have to think about the sequence. I don't have to, I do this is this.
Right.
So
I
heard. It was all I heard. I never seen the practice in real.
You heard that it was a kind of formula that you could repeat. Well, when you arrived in Mysore, and by that time you'd been doing hatha yoga for about 10 years, right? So you'd already developed a practice. And what were your first reflections about the way that Ashtanga was taught? And obviously, I mean, you're unique, and at the time, I remember, probably one of the only Indian practitioners, native practitioners in the Shala there, right? It must have felt a bit strange coming to your own country with a load of people from outside the country practicing this system, which was native to India. What were your first impressions about it, the whole thing?
So when the first day I went to the Shala, I was asked to come in the evening. And that time I was keeping long hair and a different style, and maybe because of my looks, I don't know, they felt I'm a Latin American or maybe Brazilian or something. So I was asked to pay a foreign student fee. And then I spoke and I said, I'm from India, I have all these documents and I wanted to come. So they say, okay, Indian students practice in the evening. Because I was an absolute beginner. They said, do you have a teacher? Have you practiced? I said, no. I have practiced hatha yoga, but I do not know the sequence of Ashtanga yoga. So they said, in the office, that time I did not meet either Sharathji or Saraswati Maji, mother of Sharathji. So when I went, I started with Saraswati Maji, and then she said, okay, you do Surya Namaskar. Ekam inhale, all this. But, I'm already practicing. So the kind of asanas I did before, they fall into 3rd, 4th, 5th series of Ashtanga. So for me, the practice is a piece of cake. So I don't feel anything. So I think they saw this. They saw this that, and now I think I'm 38 now. So that time I was 28. So you also have some kind of thing. Oh, I can do. I can show. So they asked me, and then I look around, there's nobody. Like, it's only 3 or 4 Indians practicing. And I said, what, like only these people practice Ashtanga? And then I realized that there's a morning class happens, and where the majority of the students comes. And there's only some locals are coming, which are approved by Sharathji or his personal students or something. But yes, it's kind of a bit of a surprising fact. But later, the more I grew in the practice, I understood that it's no more surprising to me anymore. I found the reason that Ashtanga is the way it's been taught in this system is very physically demanded. But in India, if you look at the context, yoga originated in India, and yoga has different phases. So we do not say that you have to do certain number of physically demanding asanas. So there are much easier asanas taught in a much easier way. And when I look at the other schools which are around KPJ, which are not mainly teaching Ashtanga, they're teaching hatha yoga, they're teaching Iyengar style, they're full. They're full with Indian students only. The evening classes, I've seen like number of Indians going into a small hall and practicing with a teacher who's teaching hatha yoga. So it made more sense to me that not everyone is looking to practice a rigorous form of yoga in India. So I think that helped me to understand that, okay, this is, if I'm seeking it doesn't mean that every Indian has to seek this. So that was
how long were you in the Indian class in the evening before you graduated?
I think 2 days.
Yeah,
2 days.
2 days. Did the fact that you were native to India change your relationship with Sharath straight away, or did he treat you differently, would you say?
I think the first time I went, I think as he has seen a lot of students around the world, so quite okay. And he only asked me to show some documents because maybe he felt that I have a different accent in English, I sounded differently. So he said, oh, you bring your documents, whatever proof that you're Indian, your passport and all that. And then he did mention that because when I sent, that time we had to send the application by post.
Yeah.
So I wrote that I wanted to study with him, and this is what I said. And he said, at that time, he was teaching a level 1 authorization certificate, something that was going on for people who were practitioners. So he said, no, I'm not, you cannot come to my class. I'm teaching this separate people. But when you come in the mornings, I usually watch. So all the students are practicing who are practicing with my mother. So you sign up for my mother. And Saraswati Maji, she said, no, Ajay, you come in the evening. And I said, I can wake up early, and I've never practiced evenings. So I want to practice in the mornings. Yeah. So I did them, and I think they could see that nothing is holding back. So I can do the practice. I'm not feeling exhausted or something. And then they said, okay, you come. So they gave me time at, I think, 5 a.m., which was fine for me. So I was practicing. Yeah. So third day, third day, I already finished the primary when I was with them.
3 days. Did you feel that Sharath was impressed with you? Because obviously you're well known for having an incredible ability with the practice. But I always felt that Sharath would kind of tease you and almost hold you back more for that.
See, I think what a lot of people see now, I do not know. A lot of people felt that this is only outer aspect because we only see. So a lot of people see him talking to me or guiding me. Yes, he does. And he did guide me in specific asanas, and he did give me some details because I was always inquisitive to know more than what I could do. So if I could improve the asana 1 more % just by another way to breathe, or he could just, but he gave me tips.
What kind of details out of interest? What kind of details would he say?
Okay, I think there's a sense which a lot of people, I think, if the so-called people will watch this podcast, I hope. So there was this class in 2011 or 12 when we were doing intermediate series, and I was close to the door because that was my spot always. So I was trying to go down and catching my ankles by myself. And I catch and I was swinging my arm around when he was assisting other people. So he saw that and he came up to me, and then he started to guide me on how to do it more, I think more anatomically corrected, which can help my shoulders better.
Right.
Then he didn't speak in English. So he was speaking in Hindi to me, which for a lot of students, they did not understand what he was saying. But he was not speaking full sentences. He was speaking broken form. So he was saying, go down. Now drop your hands. So it's like small words. Then he said, grab your left. Now walk up, walk left, stay here, straighten knees. So he was only speaking standing, and he was not assisting. So this is how I think the relationship was already growing deeper for me, that as a teacher and a student. So that there is different instances in Mysore style classes where I asked and he guided me. But for a lot of people, they could only see him speaking to me, but they would not understand what he would say. Because he would speak most of the time, I think in a sentence, he spoke 5 words of Hindi and 2 words of English. So
why do you think he chose to speak to you in Hindi?
I think this is for me, I think and I always wanted to learn more Kannada, his local language, which can establish the bond more stronger. Because then there are a lot of things when you explain in your first language, when you translate them, so that many times it lost in translation. So somewhere down the line,
between Hindi and Kannada,
not only in Kannada to English, or I would say Hindi to English, not everything to be translated as it is. So I think there I felt, and I started to try to understand more of the Kannada, try to listen to how people were saying. So sometimes I understood, but I think he chose to speak with me in Hindi because he knew I hail from North India and I understand Hindi better. So that was the reason.
But then, I mean, what I definitely felt with you in those early years, that you had a very great devotion to Sharathji as a teacher, as a guru, and the tradition of Ashtanga yoga. You were very meticulous and committed to it. Let's say. I mean, how you'd found the system of the complete system of asana, which I think you appreciated. From the kind of nebulous form of hatha yoga. Where you could make your own practice up. What are your feelings about tradition now, and the guru as a teacher? In an absolute kind of devoted way that I think you took Sharath.
I think there's no doubt that I still respect him the way I did before, the way I do it now. Same. All I feel that there's a sudden shift for me has happened. I do not. Now, I don't have to argue with someone, but there are a lot of instances which was happening about the Me Too movement, when there are a lot of claims were put against Sharathji Jois, showing pictures, and a lot of women practitioners shared their opinion about the assault or whatever they felt during that era or that period. And then I think Sharathji also mentioned about that something on an Instagram post where people agreed in favor, in against, like whatever. I think that's the shift has happened to me. That and this I've seen not only with the KPJ school. I've seen with different schools in India also, that it's not always that all Western students understand the behavior of the East that correctly or that closely, because there's some Western student do not understand it, and he interprets that meaning by the way he felt it.
A cultural interpretation,
But I maybe for them it's right. Maybe it's not right to me, but maybe for them it's right to way. And this is how I start to develop more open thinking of free thinking that there's a different approach to everything, and everyone has a different approach, and not everyone has to agree with your point of view. But I don't get into arguments with people because.
So you were upset about the questioning of the guru in the Me Too movement.
Yeah,
was that
yeah.
it?
So I say that if people are not happy with the behavior of the teacher, first and foremost, they should speak. They should vocal their thoughts, and they should tell the teacher so that he understands. That's the first thing. Second thing, if they kept taking the wrong behavior, that could be in any means, I think they also be held responsible for taking and having the injustice done to them because they're not speaking about it. But this is a whole story, and this has happened with Indian students also in different ways. But I think when you are very truly devoted, what I've seen in India, that when you're devoted, so there's no question asked to the teacher. Because the teacher is doing everything good for you. So whether he may have reacted bad, he may have behaved bad, he may have not taught you properly, but in the end, everything comes out in the favor of you as a student, and which I have seen in instances. So I think that's one thing. And also now, for me, the Shala held a lot of energy, the old Shala, where like all these people went, practice, and created some kind of vibration which draw people from around the world. So all this and all the number of people growing all these years. When we used to go, it was like 400-500 students practicing, and then time day passes. And now I see, of course, he's a lot more busier. He moved to a different place. He opens a big place for students to have more access, so that people spend less time in the morning. He also spends less time, at least for his own health. So now a lot of opinions, I think I see him, of course, evolving as a teacher, more, giving more access to people. But I think for me, somewhere down the line, that that he has evolved so much may not be in favor of a lot of close students, in a way that we also lose him as a teacher, because then he becomes so popular that he cannot give that space to everyone. So there, I think I do not say that the connection completely destroys or finishes, but it gets loose.
Right.
That's how I feel. So maybe I do not, in favor of, or do not agree with a teacher's point of view where he thinks that, okay, so this much large space we need to have for the students. But then I think it's do we really need that big space? And then I ask questions for myself, that if I would
You felt that the guru shishya relationship, the student teacher relationship, was diluted too much at that point.
Yeah. So I
think that was an important thing for you, and it's still an important thing for you, this relationship with the teacher, right? The process of learning yoga with the teacher to student relationship, this is a very important part of the aspect of learning, right?
Yes. So I feel usually when we talk about a traditional system, it's been done with a closed group. So usually the teachers have a closed group of students where he passes on the knowledge. This is what I've read in the stories. This is what I've heard. This is what I see in different schools also. So having said that, in Ashtanga, when we come, and in the old Shala, which I see, so the number was never so big that a teacher, even in the number of 60, 65 students when we were practicing all together, even sometimes I had the question, does he see then what I do? And with that was a question in the beginning of my practice from 2010. But the more I practice in that space, I start to feel that he does notices a lot of people who are moving. And he does notices because he's noticing everyone. And he could remember who's doing what. And this is what I start to feel, the bond or the creating of this relationship with the teacher or with the guru in the beginning. Now, all these years that, okay, I kept holding on to that bond, and I really love the connection. But I think after a while, when you get more deeper into the practice, then we start to ask, or you don't ask, but you start to get initially some questions, which if left unanswered, your practice starts to deviate. It doesn't take you towards the right way. These questions I start to get, and I ask him in German, and he was answering. He was always helpful. He was answering, and all these guides. Okay, what you should do in asana practice, what you should not do, how asanas can help you to move further in the different limbs, all this. But now I feel that since he's growing more and more, being popular, of course, the hair of the tradition he's holding, and now to a much bigger space where I practiced once only. In 2019, I went and only for a month. Now I feel that somewhere down the line, that's my personal feeling. It may not be the feeling of others, but I feel that somewhere down the line, I do not feel that sort of thing there, because it's so huge. It's like a stadium. And I
haven't been. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So yeah, something like that.
Understood. Yeah. When you mention how like the asanas can guide you in other limbs, what do you mean by that? Like what would that look like? Yeah.
Usually, if we talk about the 8 limbs of yoga, so we start with yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. But many people start to pick pranayama first in some different traditions. But when you cannot sit idle for maybe 20 minutes, for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, how access the benefit of a practice where you cannot sit idle, where you cannot sit comfortably? So asanas for sure help you to get better in a posture or open your body so that you can have more access of your organs. Like if you talk about breathing practices, where we're working a lot with the lungs, you learn more about the bandhas, how the channels you can improve your energy with. So this way. Plus asanas, I think for me, asana is also a form of devotion, not only the asana practice. So when I'm practicing, it helps me to be more self-centered. By getting self-centered, I understand my weaknesses and my strength. So when I was practicing inshallah, or I'm practicing by myself in my home, I never felt much difference. The only difference, yes, that when I'm practicing Mysore, I'm in front of my teacher. And when I'm not practicing Mysore, I'm not with my teacher physically. But the asana practice was same. So I always felt going deeper, getting more awareness of my body, of my breath. So this is how the asana took me more beyond the asana practice. So when I sit for meditation, or just say for concentration, or just close my eyes or doing something else, I'm more self-centered, that I understand where my boundaries are, how I can access my boundaries, how I can go beyond the boundaries. So these things I understand with the asana practice.
It's a funny translation of it you're saying, because self-centered we usually translate as selfish here, right? But you're actually equating self-centeredness to devotion.
Yes.
Like, could you say something more about that, about how devotion is in the practice of centering oneself? Because usually you would have the idea of giving yourself away.
Yeah. So I would say that when we practice asana, so yoga is about knowing the I first. But this I is not the ego. This I is before that ego happens. So that's how I say. So when you start an asana, you get to know, if you focus more on others and not on yourself, you do not understand how your body behaves. So like I can start relating to someone who may be a better practitioner, or who may be who have very beautiful practice, jump back, jump through, or whatever I can say in general, who may be more stronger, more flexible. But then I lose the meaning of the yoga practice, because this is for I, this is for self. So I need to center my practice on myself. So it needs to fully focus on what I do. then I start to get to know more about I as a person, I'm good in this, not good in this. And this is where I start to find more balances between my strength and weaknesses. But if I only become boastful or become more aware of my strengths, then the ego happens faster. If I know and respect my weaknesses and I keep working on both to keep the balance, then I think the practice takes you more further. So that's how I would get into it.
And coming from a traditional background, do you bring in other aspects of the Ashtanga yoga in terms of the pranayamas and maybe do you do anything like that outside the practice, the puja, anything?
Yeah. So I mean, this is in general been taught to us from childhood. I offer prayers and I do the puja. That's I get ready, take shower. So the puja comes first, and then I do the practice. I chant a prayer, different prayer than the Ashtanga one. And then when I'm practicing the Ashtanga, then I chant the Ashtanga prayer.
Right.
Visiting to post that, I was already exposed to pranayama practice long time back, much before I moved into Ashtanga. So this is also one thing I always being happy about, because in Ashtanga I haven't learned any pranayama so far. Maybe I learned after 5th series or something, 4th series. I do not know when it comes. But I'm quite happy with the way I was exposed to pranayama, because in the beginning itself, I could sit 30 minutes, 35 minutes. The first time I sat in lotus, I could sat for 30 minutes without having any pain. So in my first years in ashrams, I was always taught to focus on breath. But it was only focusing on breath, nothing else, no pranayama practice. So this was already developed. And then I learned the basic 8 pranayamas that they explain, how they explain. And then I went to different schools where I studied more about pranayama. By the time I come to Ashtanga, as in the KPJ school, I already knew the pranayama practice, but in a different set, in a different way it's been done. And I was told that there's an Ashtanga pranayama, which they teach you, which Sharathji Jois was teaching people after finishing intermediate or some more levels. And this is what I always thought, that maybe will be taught after. But this is also a question I do not know. So, yes, so I do puja, I do pranayama, and beyond the asana practice, I try to read more books and have more. I'm more devoted not only to yoga practice, that I would say.
When you say you're reading books, it's not just yoga philosophy, or it is yoga philosophy?
Philosophy, not only yoga philosophy.
Right. Yeah. Do you need the practice to practice yoga? Do you need a physical practice to practice yoga?
I think I don't agree with the point that you need a physical practice to practice yoga, because only one limb of yoga. It's not full yoga. So there are many yogis in India where you can have access to their biographies, their stories, that you will find that they were more into devotion, they were more into bhakti yoga, they were more into different forms of yoga, but they never practiced asana. And they were enlightened beings. So I do not see, and this is somehow I wrote also an article about backbends, where in Ashtanga school, we talk a lot about backbends and put it at top priority, that, okay, when you do backbends, it really helps to open up a lot of channels. But I really don't agree with the fact.
So you don't have the idea that yoga is some kind of kundalini system where you're raising a vibration internally? No.
Then the Circus Soleil people would have been teaching enlightenment to all of us rather than we practicing. So I don't think so. Backbends, yes, you may feel some energy, but it has nothing to do with opening up your channels or teaching you something else. I don't think so. And that's why I wrote an article where I talked about that someone who catches or who doesn't catches the ankles or higher the ankles, to me, more or less, they are same. They are more equivalent, rather than someone is more physically oriented and someone is not. So
yeah, I kind of remember reading that article, and I thought that we kind of almost saying that you didn't think that catching the ankles was a good thing generally for people.
I feel, because I have come across a lot of people. The more I started traveling in 2014, then I started to travel more in Asia, Europe. Then 2018, I went to US. So I think the more I saw people outside the shala teaching and then traveling and then teaching, so I start to notice that people come from different walks of life, and it's not physically good for everyone to look out for this option to catch, because a lot of people were in pain and personally taking.
So why do you think there's such an emphasis on it in Mysore?
Because I think this is where the practice ends, because this is where the practice stops at backbends. So then you have to complete the practice with a drawback. So yes, to some extent you may do the drawbacks, but I think with my students, I do not focus on everyone should catch or everyone should go very deeper. Yes, I do work with people on different levels of learning the drawbacks. Those who are more physically gifted, we go further. But beyond the drawbacks, I really don't work on pushing them more further into a deep backbend. But also not everyone. So if I have 20 students, maybe I work with two. And this I've kept and learned more with my travels and teaching abroad.
Are you still fully traditional? I mean, do you keep the practice, the sequence perfectly, or do you modify for people, or do you let people go past if they're struggling with something? Would you allow them to put the knee under for a mitrasana, not do the lotus, this kind of thing? How traditional are you these days?
I think when I started learning, I had a very narrow approach. That's our okay. So when I started learning, because I was not also traveling, and mainly the practice from 2010 to 2014, I didn't see many people using modification, even in the shala. So the more I travel, this is again same based on travel and teaching experience, then I start to come across a lot of people who had issues with knee, some issues with back. And naturally, I kept a time that, okay, I let a person work to some extent or to some amount of time on one posture. And in that amount of time, I felt that could be, I have had students who worked on Marichasnadi only for 6 months in the beginning when I started to teach in Delhi. And there are many who still remember me and who are doing really good. And some of them are intermediate, some of them are somewhere else in part of practice. But I think after a while, I start to get more easy in terms of the traditional part, based on how a person reacts to it, in a way that if someone has an injury, someone has a limitation. So there's a minimum aspect of asana we need to work with. And beyond that, I move them on. So I do not stick to, if someone has an issue with the body, that I do not stick, you have to do it.
So it's better to go through the whole practice and just modify things and
not for everyone.
Right.
Not because I have had, example, if I have 10 people, so in those 10 people, I had 2 students who I allowed to work beyond the Marichasana D, even if they could not do, beyond, I would say, Kurmasana or Supta Kurmasana, because I know they had limitations, physical limitations, which cannot be overlooked. But they were already doing their best just by attempt posture.
Yeah. And you mentioned some people being more gifted than others. Can you train someone to your level just by giving them outside training, or is it a question of genetics and luck?
No. I think one of Olga's teachers say, and yesterday we were having a talk about this, Olga and I, that there's a mathematician here who teaches. She's really awesome with mathematics in college. So she says that there's no one gifted. So it's a 5% gift and 95% hard work. So if I look at my own practice over the period of years, it has evolved a lot. But I know that how much hard work I have put into. I did not. So a lot of people, when they see me, they think that Sharathji has taught me jumps, or Sharathji has taught me this or shit. And you know, and I know many other people would know that how much Sharathji emphasis on jump back, jump through, or how much he actually teaches you to teach, or how much he. So we know. So in that scenario, I would say that when I meet someone who I think has the potential to learn what I can really teach, I don't hold myself back. But I also see that beyond what I'm teaching, it should also apply to their post-asana practice, not only the asana. So if, like, in general, that they should not be getting more or getting too fancy about doing fancy stuff. So they should stay calm and accept that, okay, they can do, but it's not that they are the only one, or they are like super. There are a lot of people, and I always believe that some people say, "Oh, you're really good with this or that," and I always say that I do not think I'm good, because I always feel that I can improve more than what I do, and I always feel that there are better practitioners than me. But then yoga teaches us to work with ourselves. So that me as a student, and when I share how I feel as a student to another student who could be a lot better than me, and when they're learning with me, so I think to keep their own balance and practice. That.
I mean, you used to tell me you used to do bits of training out of practice. Do you recommend that to any extra trainings?
I think
any tips?
I still do. I still do, but I always say that it all depends on your recovery period. Every one of us has now. See, that time when we met, I was single, dating, then got married, have a child now. So I think the more you have responsibilities in life, I do not know how much time you have for yourself to take out.
Right.
So I'm still teaching a lot of my students online, and I tell them some homeworks for evening. But I do not want them to be only asana centered or only exercise centered. So I work only maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day, because that is more than enough. Because the practice itself working. Someone asked me once that, why do you teach workshops? Why do you teach jump back, jump through separately when you said that it would work? So the practice would work and improve maybe 6 months, 8 months, 1 year down the line. But if you have some specific tips on to work on asana, maybe it can improve faster.
Right.
That's how, and this is how I say that but that's only you as a person. Do you want to work? If you do not want to work, that's the practice will work. So,
I mean, you kind of graduated to teaching over the years now, you know, from like when I met you. I think you just started to do a little bit of teaching. How is your view as a teacher, and how, you know, the kind of tips that you're giving now, how have evolved and changed as you've taught more?
It's a lot of change, because I remember that I think when we spoke, I still remember in the balcony which was facing the school, Lion School, and you cooked. Really.
And I think I asked you how to help people to do a jump back or get strength, and you just told them just lift up for many breaths.
It's. I think I've been naive because I tried to teach them the way I learned, but then I start to focus more how to break down the skills in more easier level or easier access to someone who even cannot do what I can do. So then this is how the teaching starts, because then I have to think about someone who has a knee pain, how much he can bend the knee to lift up, and how much if someone has a short arms, who thinks they have a short arm, how they would work on jump back, or how. So this is how I started to kept working on different asanas. But this is how what is all about, we say, teaching or sharing your knowledge. And then when I also observe people when they're practicing, so inside the shala, of course, it's always been an experience, because then people come all different shapes, sizes, different parts of the world, ethnic groups. So you can always judge, you can always understand the body types, the good and bads. So I think it's playing a role, and then breaking down things. And then when I start to break down more and more, and then I start to feed them in the workshops to students, and how students improved. So this is all gave me as a feedback that what I'm doing right. So I'm on the right track.
Right.
So and I kept exploring, and I still do.
What's your best tip for that strength building?
I think I always believe, because yesterday I was sharing with someone that someone said that how you do straight arms, because your arms are always right. I think I believe in some of the terms which at that time I did not know the terms. Then I started to read a lot more about things, and so some part from gymnastics we call it straight arm scapular strength and bent arm scapular strength. So SASSB. That time I was already doing a lot of stuff relates to gymnastics, but I did not know it comes from gymnastics. And later I started to read more about it and how this thing functions. So the way I was doing it, it was self-explained to me when I started to engage. And then I found more exercises which can actually help a student to improve further. So I think there are specific, if you want to improve on something, you have to work differently. And this is where the homework comes about, that you work 15 minutes on this for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then you start to see some improvement. Because your body has learned it. Then you move further, then you improve. So something like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you touch upon something, the idea of finding it correlated in gymnastics, the yoga movements. When you then read about the gymnastics, the asana is reflected in gymnastics. More recently, there's this idea that's been spread by a couple of people that the hatha yoga, as we know it, is a synthesis of British gymnastics. What do you think about that?
I think yoga dates back. They say 5,000 years, 6,000 years, but it's a lot older. So I do not agree with the fact, because if we check the history of gymnastics when it came and when the asana practice came, so it's a lot different. It could be that not denying that the gymnast or the teachers of that period, they might have access or have seen something similar, and then which they initiated into gymnastics, which got more popular before yoga. Because if you see, gymnastics happen more in the West than in the East. Still, we develop.
I suppose if I rephrase the question, is modern yoga more like gymnastics, and is there a yoga that we're not so aware of that you might have seen, in your younger travels with the sadhus and stuff, that's very different?
True. So when I show a move, like this is for my own thing. When I did something which I only know now, they say L-sit, but I was doing it. I not know that this is what is L-sit in gymnastics.
Right.
So, but this is how I lifted and moved. So if someone would see me from gymnastic background, he say, "Oh, you're doing L-sit, or you're doing a pike press, or you're doing a V lift, or you're doing handstand." So this is how I think the names and people start to relate it to more. And then but then we talk about facts. So that this is how I would get that if you, I'm sure the authors have their own facts.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem that the old yogis were doing that stuff, right? It doesn't seem that the old yogis were doing that kind of gymnastics. When you see them practice, like in the Varanasi and stuff, they're kind of doing, very crooked. Yeah.
But not everyone. Because when I was a kid, I did not see people, I do not know what move is it when we do Ekapada Shirasana. What move is it in gymnast? I don't see anyone doing it. So gymnast is mainly a sports where mainly fundamental skills are either on the board when they are flipping, doing something, the hip openers, which is a split, and mainly either on the bars or on the rings. Apart from that, there are not much because it's mainly upper body related sport. So lower body is used, but not much. Similarly, in yoga, there are all kind of asana, working on lower body, upper body, twisting, hip openers, I would say a lot of kriyas. So I think somewhere similarities are there, but I think it's I cannot say. I mean, personally, I'm strong point on that gymnastics may have come from yoga, but yoga hasn't come from gymnastics. That's my point. But I would not say like it's very similar what I see Pilates. Yeah. I read more about Pilates. So the Joseph Pilates, if I'm right, he took a lot of information from yoga asanas. And so he took a lot of information from yoga asanas, and he also, I think, have some information from gymnastics, and this is how he mixed both. And I think this is some form of, he came up with a new practice which was helping in rehab for a lot of people who are overcoming injuries and getting them back to strength, or getting them back to the improving in post-injury. So something like that sort of.
So you think that the gymnastic was a development of the original yoga practice?
I would not say, but it could be. See, not everything is same, as I'm saying. So there are, except the handstands, what I see in gymnastics, I think I don't see much. And there are a lot of scriptures which has yoga postures, dates a lot older than the gymnast history. So it's like people start to ask the question, the chicken came first or the egg came first? So,
do you see the system of hatha yoga that we're practicing and we know as Ashtanga yoga, does it appear in your mind to be particularly suited to an Indian body? Do you see differences between the Indian anatomical approach and a non-Indian approach to the asana system? I mean, traditionally, obviously, the obvious thing is that traditionally, not now, but the hip of the Indian person sitting on the floor was obviously a lot more open for the lotuses. I mean, this is the most obvious way to get into this conversation.
Not only here, but all over in Asia, because the people are more accustomed to sit, squat, move. We did not have the access of the technology or the access of gadgets in the middle class, lower middle class families, and even to some extent in the higher class families. Only it came later in India. So people were more dependent on working by themselves. So just to go somewhere, you have to like either wait for the bus, or you start walk, or for the bus you just squat and wait. So I think to a large extent, the Asian bodies, not only Indian bodies, but the Asian bodies were ready for the yoga practices. And that's why you see that the differences in the Asian bodies and the European bodies or the Western bodies. But then you would find that that now hugely a lot of people start to change the way they live. They're adapting, at least for the kids. So they're adapting a lot of different approaches so that the kids can have more mobile joints. By the time they grow up, people start to get into a lot of sports. And it's completely different happening in India. So people start to eat more on the dining tables. People start to use a lot of English toilets. So this is all changing. And this is what I see when I teach in the local crowd. Because when I travel, when I give a demo of asanas, people relate they say, oh, he's Indian. It's in his blood. It's in his genes because he comes from India. All Indians are flexible. But that's stereotyping. Because I know how many Indians are flexible. When Olga taught in Delhi, she knew how many Indians are flexible. So this is just, I think, I would say, but yes.
You don't think that there's a more flexibility, a natural flexibility in the Indian body with the heat
It is still to some extent, but I think it's going down. It's going down with the Western approach.
Right. And obviously that you mentioned the technological advances changing, sitting on chairs, et cetera, et cetera. But you also noticed, obviously, what I noticed in my last trips is the diet's changing a lot. The diet is changing from more to a more Western style diet to a more meat eating diet. Do you think that's changed the body? Do you think that's changed the the mentality? Have you seen a change in people from that?
For sure. People have more access to see. I think pizza is something which has reached everywhere in the world, most of the places, but it's not in the Indian diet system. It was never there. There are a lot of more things. So a lot of fast food has come into lives of people. So I think the food plays a big role in terms of relates to body. When you talk more about physical aspect of the body. So yes, the food plus also the mental aspect. So if you have a food which is heavier, naturally you'll feel dull, you feel lethargic, you don't want to do something, you feel sleepy, all this. Similar way, if you have a lesser food, and that's why yoga do not talk about what you should eat. Yoga only differentiates if you eat this, this is how you feel. This is what yogis said. And then they say if you eat this, this is how you would feel. So if you're eating a non-veg food, you feel more lethargy because the body takes time to digest it and it stays in your system for a longer time. And this is the talk about the vegetarian food. I was going through a lot of, though I do not relate to it, but I was going through readings of some contortionist where they talk about, because they're working so much, several hours of work daily with the body. And many of them mention that they stay off from caffeine, which they also say in yoga that you stay away from stimulants. So any kind of stimulant. Plus, they also talked about having a lot of fruits in your diet, a lot of vegetables in your diet, which yoga also talks about, because that makes your body more bendy, because the muscles can stretch more. And but naturally, to some contortionist, they talk about eating meat for the strength part. And some I read that they do not, because some people talk are vegan or they are vegetarian, something like this.
And you're a vegetarian, and do you think it's essential to be a vegetarian for yoga?
Sorry, I lost the question.
Do you think it's essential to be vegetarian for the practice of yoga?
I think it's not essential, but being vegetarian can be very helpful. But I know people who eat once in a while, but they're not daily eaters of non-veg, but they eat once in a while, and they practice to a big extent. Like they are very devoted to yoga practice. So I think that's again goes person to person. I do believe, but I do not say that you have to agree with me, because someone can have a different body, better results, claiming that he doesn't stick to somewhere. I'm not mentioning in the wrong way, but I've read in an article somewhere some yoga practitioner, because I don't call yogi. So we are not yogis. So we are just like yoga practitioners around the world. So one guy wrote that he drinks, he smokes, and he eats non-veg, and he's a yoga practitioner, and he's from US. And I only said, good luck to you. So I have no issue with what you do. That's your personal life. And he was talking about that why people talk about food and yoga so much. So, but then what kind of practice you would pass on? That's another thing. That's I would say.
So where is yoga going for you, like past the physical then? Like, how does it mean? What does it mean for you? What is the aim of the yoga, and what does it mean in your daily life?
See, yoga, first of all, for me in my daily life, that yoga do not stays only for the hours I spend on a mat practicing. So it should go beyond. It should follow in all walks of life. So I feel a lot more calm. I don't get agitated or angry or upset so easy. And once in a while, even if I feel, just with the breathing work, I calm myself down before anything happens against. So this is where yoga always works for me in my daily life. Second, I feel that where yoga is going. I think, of course, yoga is going, if we look back 20 years ago or 15 years ago, So yoga hasn't reached to so many countries in such a big population now, which has reached. A lot of scholars from India or from the East, people who do not knew before, now they know. So, of course, yoga is working good for the humanity and people are following it. So for sure, it's the rising sun, and it will always be. However, I personally believe that physical practices or dominated physical practices will not have the same rising sun picture always, because people always look to go beyond the asana practice. If you look out, and this is just an example, if there are 10 students in the class, only 2 or 3 or maybe 1 is really good in the asana practice, and 9 are kind of average or middle or some kind of slightly higher, but not excellent. So majority of the people are not excellent in the asana practice. And whatever pictures, videos, movies we see on YouTube are of those who fall into the lesser percentage of the asana practitioners. So majority of them look already beyond the asana because they need more than the asana practice, because asana is not the full practice for them. So this is where the breathing works comes in, pranayama. When you start to get into pranayama, naturally you start to feel a lot more different about things happening around you. You become more sensitive. So I think.
So you think if you're excellent in the practice, is that enough? If you're
I think I always believe that a non-flexible student can be a better practitioner than a flexible student. And this approach was given to me long time back by Sharathji's mother, Saraswati Maji. So once, I think in a conference or somewhere, I think I was next to her and she was speaking. This is from 2010 or 11. I think 10 probably. So she said that a stiff student is a much better student than a flexible one, which is, I've seen with my students that you slack when you're flexible because you think you can do tomorrow and you can have access, you don't lose your flexibility and all this. But a stiff student always know that he has to work. Without working, he's not going to get, it won't be completed for him. So I think, and I've seen personally a lot of experiences, a lot of exposures to people when I've come across that this statement holds its meaning to a larger extent.
One final question. Do you find that the context of yoga is lost a little bit from a non-Indian perspective when we're not understanding? I mean, I always felt that you come to it from understanding of puja, from understanding of the ritual and the way that yoga as a system is a part of it. And then it comes over here, say over here, outside India, and it's taken within the cultural context that we understand, which doesn't have any other framework around it. So it's then just taken on as a system or a value judgment system taken on the physical ability only. Do you find that there's a trouble in its translation now as it spreads, as it evolves?
For sure. I mean, because even in yoga, that not everyone takes yoga so seriously, but there are different forms that in all the religions in India, whether they are practicing yoga or not yoga, but they've been taught to devote to God, whichever religion they belongs to, or whichever family they comes from. So they've been taught to bow to someone. And this is how gradually you start to accept that there's a higher power above you. Now, when we start to practice yoga, we start to, I think, either feel it more, that because you start to see that you're very limited as a human being. And then you start to, you become more sensitive through the practice, through the yoga practice. Having said that, when this practice starts to travel abroad, when I go abroad, I see similar things. But no one to blame, because this is the part of the culture they brought up with, or they grew up in. So they see that this is not their culture, or this is not. So they look at it only as a physical aspect first. But I've personally noticed that to some, not for everyone. To a good number of people, this aspect changes the more deeper they get into asana practice. So through the
asana gradually does the job of giving them a more devoted attitude to something other than their own body.
Yeah, because it breaks down the ego somewhere down the line, because you feel sooner or later you're limited. So you see that you cannot do everything. Not everything is in your hands. And then you start to understand that, okay, there are things beyond this. And then that's the point people start to explore more. Like me, then people start to travel to different places, not only to seek out asana, but then they start to seek out more. That this is how they start reading more about.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. You find that your attitude or your feeling about yoga has expanded since you've traveled outside India? Has it changed your attitude to yoga?
I think it was always there, but maybe I was not. I think it enhanced more when I started to travel, for sure. But it was always there. So because I was always before the Ashtanga practice, I think if I stayed with the hatha yoga branch, even what we practice is also hatha, but in different tradition, I would say, asana based. So I think I would have been more less of the asana oriented practice, but more of a balance of all the practices, which I see. The majority of the traditions are talking asana as a therapy, rather than asana only as a pure asana based practice. But yes, what I noticed that the Indian government started its own step where they started to made an Indian Yoga Association, and they started to write down all details about asanas, and they have a specific website where anyone can go and find information about what asana belongs where. But I think the work is not fully completed. So I think it might be coming up soon. So I think, yes.
So do you think the Ashtanga base is enough? Obviously we're taught in Ashtanga a system that is completely exclusively asana based.
Yeah.
Should that be broadened outward? Should people be taught other limbs along with these asanas, or is the practice in itself going to do the job somewhere down the line?
I think the practice will do the job, but if a student starts to explore more, the better they do it. The earlier they do it, the better for them, because then they start to understand how limited is the asana practice. If you only stick to asana practice, it's very limited. It's very, very limited. It may give you the sense maybe 5, 6, 10 years down the line, but you would lose all this time. Already start to find maybe information more about in your second year, third year, fourth year. I don't say that this information has to work. It doesn't work right away. You read Atha Yoga Anushasanam, the first part of sutras, the first sutra, but yoga starts now. So of course you need to be disciplined. You need to do a lot of things. So then gradually when you go, and in 195 yoga sutras, the sutras which talk about asana practice barely 3 or 4. You also try to understand that when the scriptures are talking this, naturally then the limit, the asanas are not like us. You cannot place full importance on the asana practice.
Do you have a particular scripture that you would recommend, or
I think that all books, whatever you read, but this is what I was sharing with someone else, that since a lot of people in the West only read the Western scholars, I would say that there are a lot of Indian scholars who wrote very beautifully. So I think it's always good to have a combination of East and West, so which can give you the picture of or the picture of the same coin, like two sides of the same coin. So it's always have knowledge or different opinion of someone else also.
Okay. All right. Just to round it up now, and just to give a kind of rounded idea of you outside the yoga, let us know just a silly couple questions. What inspires you, and what is let's say a guilty pleasure that you have outside yoga?
Guilty pleasure. I think not reach to that guilt, because everything I do, I don't be remorseful of something what I did.
Right, yes, yeah.
Yeah, quite okay. Like, don't know what is guilt in general. But yeah. And what inspires me, I think everything inspires me. I try to, now I'm a father, so I see my son growing, and that inspires me to be more playful. And when I go out, I also listen to Sadhguru a lot. I kind of knew of him long time back, but I was not following much. And then I started to read his books, and which starts to find a lot more, as everyone says, that he puts a lot more logic into our Indian customs for a Western mind. So I start to...
But even the way he phrases it within his idea of inner engineering, it's kind of along the Western lines, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's some small, simple steps of your daily life which you become more aware, and it can really help you to be a better human being. So I think it does work. So, and people like him, and there are, I think, you can seek out inspiration from anyone and everyone. So that's what I would say.
And just to lower the tone a bit, Kino told me recently that when you first went to Miami to see her, Tim introduced you to cheese. Have you started enjoying cheese now?
Sorry, Tim introduced me to cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think...
We'd say your guilty pleasure is that you've become a cheese aficionado now. Yeah.
A guilty pleasure in that sense would be only pizza, if I enjoy that. But but I'm not. I don't feel guilt, because it's just a food, and but the cheese is something. As Tim was someone who introduced me to blue cheese and some different forms.
Yeah, no, I just found it quite funny because they said that your face when they first gave it to you, it was funny.
Yeah.
You were very surprised with the taste of it.
Because cheese is something what I read later about it, how it's been made and how they do it.
Yeah.
India, we have more fresh cheese because So for me, of course, it was different, and the taste. He gave me blue cheese to start off with, so it was really bitter, and I did not understand, because to me it's related to very of the tamasic food in that context. So I did not understand like how someone can enjoy it. Once in a while I have a sandwich, which have. Then I focus more and more on the live food, which has energy. But I think as this is what from Sadhguru I was listening, that anything you do by choice is better than by compulsion. But once in a while, if you enjoy something, you did something, if you ate something, as long as it's not a compulsion, it's okay. So you did it by choice. So I think
this
follow more often this way.
Very good. Okay, Ajay, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you after a number of years, but we haven't spoken, and I hope to see you in the massive airport hangout at some point in the future, maybe.
We will do, and just keep me posted. We'll speak more.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.